So in the last video, we saw how to add items to a core data database and then how to retrieve those items and even how to get a particular value from those items. In this video, I'm going to show you some slightly more complex ways that you can deal with data, and I'm just going to start by running this app and seeing what it actually shows us, because it's something not entirely expected. Instead of getting the result.password on its own, we actually get optional pass. And that means the value of the variable is pass, but the variable itself is an optional, which we've seen several times now, and we know hopefully that it means that it could be nil. But this is a slight frustration that the Xcode returns optional pass instead of just pass. So I'm going to show you quite a neat way round dealing with that. What we can do is create a new variable. Let's just call it pass for the moment, and set it equal to result.password, and then we'll use the exclamation mark to force the outcome of result.password. So if result.password turns out to be nil, this will actually give us an error in our app. So we're taking a bit of a risk here by doing that. So to get around that risk, what we can do is put an if statement around the whole thing. And then what will happen here is if this works, i.e. if result.password does have a value, then pass will be given that value, and pass therefore is not an optional. It's a proper variable that we can be sure has a value if the if statement turns out to be true. So then we can just print ln pass, and this should display just pass without the optional. So let's just run that and see what it does. And this is a very useful construct when you're dealing with optionals, because it allows you to use that optional, there we go, only if it has a value. And that's a very useful thing to be able to do. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is how to delete an item from core data. And to do that, I'm just going to add another one so that we've still got something there when we delete it. So let's have Kirsten, and we'll make her password pass2. So now when we run that, we should find that it returns two passwords, pass and pass2. Fantastic. Let's now comment that out again, because we don't want to continually add new users every time. But let's say we wanted to remove Kirsten from the database. Well, we'd need to check, of course, that the user was Kirsten. So we can do that easily enough. Let's change our pass to user, because we're now dealing with the username rather than the password. So this is result.username. And we can check if user is equal to Kirsten. So to remove Kirsten from the database, we'd need to have a way of knowing whether the item that we're looking at here is Rob or Kirsten, or indeed someone else. Now, you may have already experimented with this, but if we try and change this to result.username, we get an error. And the error is any object does not have a member named username. Now, we know that it does, but Xcode doesn't. So there's a nice way around that. What we can do is get rid of our .username and instead use value for key. And the key that we want to use is username. And let's just change this to user here. Now this will give us a warning, and the warning is that the value for key is a NS object, or sorry, an any object, and that's not necessarily what we want. In fact, it's not what we want. We want it as a string. So one solution here would be to change that to give it an explicit type of any object, but actually what we're going to do is use as string to cast this as a string. That will give us another issue but we can deal with that. So that a forced downcast produces a non-optional. It's better to use a question mark there. So this will only succeed if there is a value here. And that's good because we've got our if statement which tests whether or not there is a value anyway. So let's now have a look at user, and we'll just run that. So really this value for key is a better way of getting data from the database than the method that we used before. There we go. So now we've got our username. So we want to check if the username is equal to Kirsten, and we don't need those brackets, so I'll just get rid of those. So if Kirsten is the user, we want to delete her, and we do this by referring back to our context, and there's a method we can use called delete object, and that's the one we want. The thing to notice is that the object that this method expects is of type NS managed object, and our result object is of type any object. So we need to recast it, which you should be familiar with by now. So it's just result as NS managed object. There we go. Then we just need context save to be sure that that's been done. And we'll do that at the end of the results. And we'll just put here println user has been deleted. So that with any luck will tell us that Kirsten has been deleted. Let's have a look. So we'll run that and we should just get the text Kirsten has been deleted. There we go. Fantastic. And if we run it again, we should get nothing because Kirsten's no longer in the database. And there we go. So there's nothing to delete. So that's how you remove an item from core data. Now we're going to see how to search for specific users in the database. And to do that, or before we do that, I should say, I'm going to bring this back so that I have a number of different users so that I can actually search for one. I'm going to comment this code out, but I'll leave it there so that it's in the downloadable code in the next lecture so that you can see it and use it if you want to. So let's now just run that. We should get no output, but we will add Kirsten to the database. While we're there, I'll add Tom to the database as well. And then I'll just add in a quick display the results just to make sure that we then have 3 different items in the database. And that will enable us to do some searching for individual people. Let's have a look. We've got Tom there, there's Kirsten, and there's Rob. Fantastic. So we've got all the items that we need. So let's now comment the lines out so that we don't get lots more Toms. 1 is plenty. So let's say we want to update Kirsten's password to something even more secure than her current password, which is pass2. What we would do is add what's known as a predicate to the request. And a predicate is essentially something like a search criteria. So it might be that the username is equal to something, or the password is equal to something, or that the age is less than something, or whatever it might be. That's what the predicate is. And we can add that with request.predicate equals, and we're going to create an NS predicate. And we're going to use format string and args. And this initial string is the name of the key of the item that we want to search for. So we're going to be searching in the username. And we use a slightly strange setup to do this search. We look for username equals, and then we type %@, which looks very strange at first glance, but essentially what's going on here is this acts as a placeholder for our argument, which is going to go over here. So we want to check for the username being equal to Kirsten. So we put that there, and that, if you've seen a bit of Objective-C before, this will be more familiar to you. But essentially what this does is tests for the username being equal to something, and then we give the something there. So this should change our request so that it actually only returns a single item, and that will be the item with the username Kirsten. So let's again just put println results there. And we'll do a quick run, and we should find that only Kirsten is returned. There we go. No other bits of information there, just Kirsten. So that's how you request a particular item from the database, or it could be a lot of items. We might have more than one Kirsten in our database. And you can, of course, add multiple predicates to check for people with certain usernames and certain passwords, which is what you would do if you wanted to log someone in and check whether their credentials were correct. Great. The last thing we're going to do is update an item which is already in the database. I did mention this earlier. We're going to change Kirsten's password. So we'll keep the setup as it is, again, so that you've got all the code in the item from the next lecture, but we know that this is going to return only Kirsten from the database, and then this bit of code checks whether the user is equal to Kirsten. So we can put our updating Kirsten code in here because we know that it will only be Kirsten that triggers this statement. So all we do is say result set value, and we want to set the value. What will the new password be? Pass6. She really hasn't learned her lesson about passwords. For key password. Fantastic. And then we've already got our context save, so that will update in the database. So let's just run that. Take a moment to think what the outcome of this is going to be. It is, of course, for the moment going to be Kirsten and her original password because we haven't updated it yet, or at least we haven't by the time that we've done the search. So let's now run it again, and now we should find that her password has been changed to pass6. There we go. So you've now learned how to remove items from core data, how to update items which are already there, and how to use predicates to search for particular items within core data. We're now going to move on from core data, and in the next video I'll show you how to download images from the web and use them in your apps. I'll see you there.